What's going on, guys? And today, if you couldn't already tell, I'm going to be uploading my first ever video to this channel. For some odd reason, I had this brilliant idea that let's go out and trigger every single person who watches this video, even if it's only going to be around, about 5 people. So the way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be ranking all 20 MCU movies from worst to best based on my opinion. So let's get right into it. Now, coming in at our last place spot has to be Thor: The Dark World. Now, this definitely isn't the worst made movie in the MCU, but it probably is the least memorable, which I see as worse. There's just nothing interesting about this movie, and in my opinion, it all stems from the main villain, Malekith. Pretty much his entire arc as a villain is just being bad to be bad. He wants the ether so he can become more powerful and just take over the universe, and it's just not interesting in my opinion. And then this movie follows Natalie Portman's character a lot and Thor Back on Earth, which I didn't think was a huge hit in the first movie. And again, it just brings us back to Tom Hiddleston as Loki being just this highlight in this movie and being the best part of this movie. And in my opinion, this is probably his worst movie out of the entire MCU because, you get that second fake Loki death scene and it just doesn't have as much impact. Liam Hemsworth is a great actor though, and I think you can see that in Ragnarok more than this movie. So just this formula really doesn't hit it for me. Coming into our next to last place spot has to be The Incredible Hulk. Now, I said Thor: The Dark World probably isn't the worst made movie, it's just the least memorable, but this one is probably the worst made movie. I just don't think the acting is very good in this movie, especially from our female lead, Liv Tyler. I just feel like the voice she makes in this movie is very weird and awkward. It's almost like she's whispering through most of the movie, and I'm not sure if this is her actual voice or not because I've never seen her in any other films. But also the lines she has been given are just, they don't make any sense a lot of the time, and they just seem kind of campy and odd.
What? They were the stretchiest pair they had.
I'll take my chances. We can't use any of this, because they can track all of it.
Well, my lip gloss, can they track that?
No, you can take a lip gloss.
Thank you. I need my glasses.
Well, you can take your glasses and your watch.
What's the matter, baby? You don't like a good
The
ride?
second problem I really had with this movie was that the CGI wasn't really done the best, and you can't really blame it too much because this movie's over 10 years old now, but you can definitely tell the difference, and it kind of hurts the scenes when either the Hulk or the Abomination are in the scene and they're placed in real world environments because they just look so out of shape. The one positive I can say about this movie though is the end battle in the last fight is really climactic. I thoroughly enjoy it. I think it's one of the most underrated last fights in all of the MCU. Is Iron Man 2. This is another one of those films that I feel like is more forgettable and boring rather than bad. I don't feel like there's anything that is overwhelmingly bad about this movie, but there's really nothing overwhelmingly good about this movie either. I feel like this movie's best quality is that it's building up to the Avengers, which is a great film. It introduces characters like Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, the Rhodey character becomes War Machine, little things like that. This movie has a lot of Nick Fury in it, but this movie on its own really is nothing special, and it's quite boring actually. And that's probably why the most memorable thing about this movie for me is Mickey Rourke and his Russian accent and his obsession with his bird, which is something very minor, and I think this just shows how mediocre this film is.
We got you the bird, pal.
This is not my bird.
What do you mean? That's the bird. This is the bird. Yeah. Pulled a lot of streets to get this bird. This is a great bird.
It's a beautiful
We got this all the way from Russia.
A man, this is not my bird.
Quickly moving on to our 17th spot, we have Thor. Now, This movie, again, definitely isn't the best, but I feel like it's better than The Dark World, but it has a lot of the same problems that Thor The Dark World has. Much like its sequel, which I've already talked about, it spends way too much time on Earth following Natalie Portman and her crew of scientists, and I feel like that hinders the movie. Now, the movie starts out following Thor in Asgard, and I feel like that's where this movie is at its best, even though it's still not too great. Again, though, we get to see Asgard for the first time, and it's done pretty well, especially looking at the time period that this movie was made in. But there is no doubt in my mind, again, that the best part of these first two Thor films is Tom Hiddleston as Loki, as he just does this role so well and puts on an amazing act, and that is why it falls in at our number 17 spot. Now, guys, coming in at our number 16 spot, it has to be Iron Man 3. Now, I was really tempted to place this movie lower than Iron Man 2 because this movie frustrates me more than Iron Man 2 does, but I know this movie's probably the better film, so I just couldn't do it. But the thing is I really don't like the direction that this movie takes, and obviously it's because of the switch in the Mandarin around halfway through the movie. Now, most people hate this switch because it's not loyal to the comics, and I really don't read the comics because I really don't read that much in general, but I don't feel like this is a very good film move either. Most of the way through this movie, I was really interested in the villain of the Mandarin. I felt like he was mysterious. Tony didn't know who he was, and he was just putting all these attacks in on the United States, and Tony makes the dumb move of calling him to his house, and he just blows it up. I felt like this villain was very interesting and that they should have kept with it, but they didn't do that. Halfway through this movie, he's just an actor and he's this goofball, so they can pretty much replace him with Killian, who takes the exact same villain arc as Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man. And we know that villain arc is not good, and we've seen it so many times, and also movies like Batman with Jim Carrey's The Riddler. It's just this overplayed villain arc, and I don't like it at all. Just because someone doesn't notice you, it doesn't mean someone's probably gonna come back and kill you. But this movie, honestly, it doesn't hit it for me. I think Tony does a good job, or Robert Downey Jr. does a good job as Tony Stark, but that's about it. And Robert Downey Jr. does a good job as Tony Stark in every single movie, so this is why this movie is at the bottom of our list. Coming into our 15th spot has to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, those first 5 movies that we just covered, if someone asked me to watch it with them, I'm probably going to take a hard pass. The only time I'm going to watch those 5 movies are when I'm doing like a movie haul and trying to do something like this where I rank every single movie. But from here on out, if someone asks me to watch one of these movies with them, I'm probably going to take it up on their offer because I like all these movies. With that being said, the next 2 movies are probably the movies that disappoint me most because they just didn't live up to the hype. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is coming off strong after the first Guardians, and I really enjoyed it the first time I watched it in theaters, which I feel like most people did. But watching it a second and a third time and just letting the story kind of take its place in my mind, it is really disappointing. I'm just not interested in the Sovereign storyline, and the Kurt Russell storyline I liked at first, but I really love Chris Pratt as an actor. I think he's great. I love him in Parks and Rec. But when you turn him into a demigod, and then you're just like, you know what we should do in this movie? We should have him play catch. But you know with who? Kurt Russell. But I feel like if I wanted to see a dad and his son play catch, I could just go to a park on a Saturday. And I don't want to spend money and watch a 2-hour movie to have things like that happen in it. I get how it builds his character as he doesn't know his father, but I feel like there's a better way that you could do that than just having them play catch. But again, with the positives of this movie, Baby Groot is adorable, even though I feel like he's kind of just in there to sell merch. Drax is hilarious. Dave Bautista is probably one of my favorite characters in this movie when he plays Drax. The Yondu death scene is probably the most emotional death scene up until Infinity War, but this movie overall is just sadly disappointing. Coming in at our 14th spot is going to be Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, like I've already said, this movie is more disappointing rather than bad. But because of this movie having the title of Avengers, because of that first Avengers film being so great, this second one really can't live up to the hype. With that being said, I also feel like this movie is more of an Avengers 1.5 rather than a second full Avengers film. I feel like Captain America Civil War is more of a second Avengers film, because this movie just ties in so well to Captain America Civil War with the entire Sokovia battle and how Tony makes Ultron. These are the key factors that start the conflict between Cap and Tony. Now, some positives with this movie: I really like James Spader as Ultron. I feel like he does a really good job. I like his voice. It's this eerie, creepy type of voice, and I really enjoy that. Also, this movie has some really good team-up scenes for our main heroes to fight in, and it just makes it really climactic and really fun. Coming in at our number 13th spot is going to be Doctor Strange. Now, this movie for me is a reason why people should watch movies more than one time, because the first time I watched this movie, I absolutely hated it. It probably would have came in my bottom 3 Marvel movies the first time I watched it. But the second time I watched it, I was able to actually understand this movie much more, because the first time I watched it, I really didn't understand the magic lingo that they used in this movie. And also, after seeing Strange in movies like Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Infinity War, it helps me appreciate the character more. Now, that being said, this movie also definitely has some pretty big negatives in it, especially the main villain. He is quite dull and bland. It doesn't have that much of a character. It kind of just has a stern face the entire time. And he's pretty much just a henchman for Dormammu. But Dormammu in this film is really freaking cool. The entire bargain scene between Doctor Strange and Dormammu is probably one of my favorites in the MCU, and it's just beautiful. And that is also a great thing about this movie, is it is absolutely beautiful. The effects team did an amazing job, and it might be probably the best movie when you look at it from an effects standpoint. And for those reasons, that's why it comes in middle of the road for me out of the movies in the MCU. Coming in at our number 12 spot is going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, I originally had this movie a little bit higher up, but I kind of had to push it back a little bit because there is so many unanswered questions in this movie. Primarily being, why has no one in this movie act like they have ever heard of Thanos? Especially in the end credits scene. It makes absolutely no sense. When all the Pims and the Van Dynes are dusted at the end of this movie, they acted like it happens with no prior warning. If Secretary Ross in Infinity War can know that Thanos is coming before he steps a foot on Earth, how does Hank Pym not know that Thanos has all the Infinity Stones when Thanos is literally in Wakanda? Number 2, why is Scott Lang's ex-wife's new husband more obsessed with Scott Lang than Scott Lang's own daughter? This man's face when he gives Scott Lang a hug is probably the most creepy thing I have ever seen in any movie. And last but not least, why is Scott Lang playing Rock Band in 2018? Come on, Paul Rudd, you're better than this. But in all seriousness though, this movie's not bad in any means. It's really funny. I enjoy watching this movie. I watched it yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I had no problems with it. It does what it's supposed to do, but again, those unanswered questions kind of make me want to push it back a little bit, but it knows what it's doing. It's not trying to be the best Marvel movie out there, and again, that's why it's in the middle of the pack for me. Coming in at our 11th spot is going to actually be the first Ant-Man. Now, I like a lot of things about this movie. Mainly, it's really funny, in my opinion, and it's not trying too hard to be funny, which can be a problem in some of these movies. And I really like the origin story that this movie tells, because if you can tell a good origin story, I feel like you can make the audience really care for your character. And after watching this movie, I really did care about Scott Lang and his family. But while saying that, of course this movie has some problems. And guess where? Did you say main villain? You'd be correct, because we've seen this villain arc in so many Marvel movies, and it's just this scientist who is jealous for someone's creations, in this case Hank Pym, and his protege under him. He just wants to perfect it, and it drives him crazy. We saw the same thing in the first MCU film and Iron Man 1. So the villain trope or arc is not original in this movie, and yet again it comes to hurt this film, and it's just quite sad, because I feel like if this movie had a good villain, it could possibly, break into our top 10. Now guys, I may have told a little lie in the video. So when I originally started making this, I truly did intend to rank all 20 Marvel movies, but here's what I'm going to do instead. So as I'm editing this, I have realized I'm about halfway, and it's about 16 minutes in. And for my first video, I'm really not trying to make it 30 plus minutes long. So congratulations, I have managed to probably trigger most of you by my ranking and lie to you all in the first video. I'm doing so well at this, I can agree. So I will actually probably upload my 10 through the first place ranking in a day or two, and if not, I'll get it out within the week, I promise. So hopefully y'all enjoyed this ranking so far. If you've made it to the end, thank you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Peace.